So good evening and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Planning and Highways Committee. And I will turn to the Deputy Clerk to performance of apologies for absence.
Apologies received from Councillor Lister, who is joining us tonight, and Councillor Lillycrop and Councillor Walker.
Thank you. So turning to item 2, are there any declarations of interest that anybody, any member wishes to declare at this point? See none, so thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 3 to take as read and confirm as accurate the minutes of the meeting held on 5th of April 2022.
I happen to propose a true and accurate record.
Thank you. Thank you. John beat you just so thank you for seconding. Any comments before we vote on them? No, so those in favour of approved. Thank you, that's unanimous. Thank you. So matters arising from the previous meeting.
The only thing is to say West Berkshire Council fed back to us that they were thankful for the road name suggestions and they will come back to us with a decision.
We'll move on to the first substantive topic, which is the Iceni Projects consultant at West Berkshire Council. So we've asked to receive a summary of the presentation which has been circulated. If I recall correctly, circulated. The meeting itself was not public, and the record is not public either, publication. So with that in mind, are there any questions or comments? I think, was everybody here? I think Councillor Cotton, were you at that meeting?
I was.
Okay. So everybody, I think, who's present tonight was present at on that occasion. So I just ask if anyone has any additional points to make before we move on to the main substance, considering the matters arising from that meeting. No, thank you. So if we move on to the matters arising, and the most substantive matter is the contribution, which apologies for circulating it so close to the meeting, but that was inevitable given that the time frame in which we were asked to produce it was so short. So I'll give a brief explanation for people who may not be aware. The survey which we became aware of contains a multiple choice two basic substantive questions. Well, in fact 3, but 2 of them are duplicating, which is one of which is the things that your top 2 things that you like about your community now and the things you'd like to improve in the future, and questions about transport. And in both cases, they ask you, the respondents, to select 2 out of a maximum of 2 out of the options available. So in writing this response, I felt it was not appropriate for the council just to choose 2 because all of the matters were important. And I therefore took the options that were presented in the survey and have written a narrative response on all of those options because they're all important. And this is based, as far as I could, on either agreed positions of the council or discussions that I can remember from consideration of planning meetings or the various presentations that we've had from West Berkshire Council officers and other and developers at various times. As we get later on into the section on transport, then because the vision is looking ahead 30 years, and we don't generally do that, I've had to add some new information based on my professional work particularly relating to driverless cars. So what I'd suggest that we do is that in order to structure the discussion, because there may be comments on this, the first I'll open for general comments, and then we'll go through the document section by section, and people can ask questions or make comments as we go through, rather than just having a disjointed discussion about or people raising different points as in sequence. So, firstly, has anybody, any member, got any general comment about this document? I see no one.
I've read through the first draft. I thought it was very good. Who composed it? Was it entirely you or with?
Effectively entirely me. I've had comments today from councillors Dillon and Cole, which are the basis of the changes in the document, and those are, I would say, those changes are clarifications, and in the case of the education, some extra information that Councillor Cole gave in his capacity as with the Kenwick School Academy Trust. So yes, but I've tried as far as possible to base it on my recollection of the discussions we've had, and frankly, the time that was available didn't allow me to go through and check all the history of our deliberations over the last few years. Okay, so what I'll do then, if there's no other general comments, is to move through the looking behind. Thank you. I go through section by section. So section 1, the introduction. Any comments? No, thank you. Section 2, which is a summary of the key points of the of what follows. So perhaps we'll come back to section 2 once we've done the rest of it, because that will be consequential. So section 3, and I'll go, I think 3.1, go to 3.1 and 3.2 are points that were not addressed in the survey, but I thought they were important points that the council wished to raise. So the first one on the identity of Thatcham, particularly focusing on the strategic gap. Any comments upon that? No. Thank you.
Can I just say, with the flooding, the problem appeared to be that the rain fell on high ground and low ground, but obviously the rain goes from high ground to low ground, and followed the old ancient watercourses that were running through Thatcham, even though some of them have been boarded over, built over. That served to aggravate the flood damage. So no, a point of making that should be perhaps in the under the heading of flood risk, so that they are aware of the old watercourse.
Okay, so I think if we can identify points to have a pen, we can. I think that's a factual point. So if we add that afterwards, if that's okay with.
It's okay with me. Yeah.
And the point is that the West Berkshire Council, together with Thatcham Town Council, have almost completed the flood alleviation schemes to address the watercourses. But the issue that has been raised in several presentations by the Flood Forum is the issue of the sustainable drainage in the new developments, which is therefore what I focused on here. But we'll add that point about the flooding, if that's necessary. I think it might already be covered, but we'll talk offline and sort that out.
On flooding as well, I think there's a big danger that we think that the only flooding we're going to get in Thatcham is the same type that we had in 2007, and the flood alleviation scheme has been put in place to prevent Thatcham getting flooded by that type of flooding. But what's actually much more likely, probably given climate change and the weather patterns we have, is a different type of flooding, which is where you get constant rain day after day after day, not a flash flood like this one, but constant rain, which raises the water table. And we actually had that in the winter of in January 2014, when the floodplain, if you like, by the River Kennet, those fields behind the football club were lakes. They were underwater, and if you'd seen a picture from the air, you'd have seen just the houses and the roads, but the fields were just lakes. So the forecast is that sort of flooding is more likely to happen in the future. And if we'd had a few more days of rain like that, we could have had houses flooded. So my reason for raising that is that we know that we have one development scheme which is intended to build in the floodplain, and that seems to me to be foolish, given that you might find that we have that sort of flood as well. So it's just if you like recognising that there's another type of flood risk, which is not the sort that we've
So I think
mitigated against.
to summarise that, I think what you're saying is that we ought to put a new paragraph in saying that flood risk due to
Rising water tables,
water
basically.
tables,
Yeah.
it should
Continuous.
also needs to be considered in the provision.
The phrase I think is heavy and continuous rain as opposed to a thunderstorm.
They're not thunderstorms, that's right.
Okay, well, I think again, if it's okay with the members, then I think these points are, we can draft offline and insert without needing to agree at exact text in this meeting.
I
If you're comfortable with that.
just cover the point.
Yeah, thank you. So section 3.3, resilience to climate change. I think Councillor Foster, you indicated that you.
I had just one comment on this. I thought it was all good. But it mentions that the government has announced its intention to achieve net zero by 2050. What it doesn't say is that West Berkshire Council and Thatcham Town Council, in declaring their climate emergencies, have said that they intend to reach net zero by 2030. So I think it would be worth adding in a sentence just to say that.
Looking at Councillor Lister from time to time. So thank you. Moving on to 3.4, parks and open spaces.
Sorry.
No, I was looking at Councillor Lister to see it.
Chair, I'll just shout if I need to interrupt,
Yeah, okay,
but
thank you.
I don't have any intention to.
No comments there. Section 3.5, I was remiss in forgetting that there are several pubs in the town centre of Thatcham. So I hope that was pointed out to me and I've added that. Any other comments on section 3.5? See, nobody. Section 3.6, ease of getting around. This, of course, is related to the following, the latest section on transport, highlighting the three major sources of congestion in the town. And there's a couple of points of clarification that I've pointed out about in the text, which is the amendments, they're just clarifications. Any comments on section 3.6? No. Section 3.7 on housing choices. No, thank you. Section 3.8, that's on leisure. It's just an editorial clarification and an addition of a reference to the West Berkshire playing pitch strategy, which one would hope that Iceni were already familiar with, but as we're mentioning it, we're referencing it. Thank you. Section 3.9. Yeah.
I haven't mentioned that the football club. I mean, maybe they're not the main one, but there is the football club south of the river. There is the cricket club here. You've only mentioned Kennet Leisure.
So perhaps we ought to say is that the main publicly owned. I'm just wondering if we.
I see, that was the distinction.
I think that's the point, is because we're talking about the local plan and what the council and what might be done. So I think perhaps.
Well, even a nature discovery centre is a leisure facility.
That's true. I don't think there's any comment that we need to make about it in terms of development. That would.
No,
so probably we ought to mention Nature Discovery Centre because that is in essence public, and probably add the word public. And I think we could also mention that there are additional the private, the club owned facilities. Okay. I think, although there are many club owned facilities, I think those are the only two that are sufficient. Because they are effectively providing similar facilities to the public, then they need to be taken into account. But you know, the bowls club and so on, I think is probably for the purposes of this document, we can't mention everything. Yeah, so I think if we could just mention those two, those are major grounds which are part of the complement of facilities shared with Henwick. So yes, we'll do that.
Now to just raise the point, it's 3.6, second paragraph, or about Kennet Secondary School are already close to full capacity.
And I haven't got it here.
3.9.
Yes, so
I would suggest it's better English to say Kenneth Secondary School are approaching full capacity. I don't think it reads.
I've taken that word from Councillor Cole, who
What word?
close to, because and as the chair of the Academy Trust, I prefer to stick with those words because that might reflect how he sees.
I'm suggesting a better.
But the point is, if you change the wording, it changes the emphasis. I prefer. I agree if I was drafting, but I prefer to stick with the wording that he used as his in his position.
Sorry, why do you want to
Well,
change?
he's not here.
He's not here, but I'm saying my view is that as I've taken the
Why do we want to change it?
I think it's just better English. Just looking at the word already closed. Close and close are spelt the same, but
okay.
that's why I would avoid it.
The point is that the reason I'm doing that is because they have a slightly different interpretation in terms of how near they are to 100%.
All right, Chairman.
Okay.
I want to get home tonight,
Okay.
so I'm not taking it further.
So those changes are all well. Some of them are from Councillor Dillon, but mostly from Councillor Cole. Thank you. Section 3.10. That was a suggestion from Councillor Dillon to rephrase in a more positive way. That change there. So we then move on to section 4, which is more forward-looking and therefore less closely derived from previous discussions and highways and other accounts. I think the key points, exception perhaps in section 4.1, which references the government's road traffic forecast, and the key point here is that all of their scenarios show an increase in road traffic. And this is something that we have raised in previous communications with West Berkshire Council. So any comments on that? Section 4.2 then, on zero emission private vehicles. So no one seeking to raise comments.
Well, Chairman, I'm obviously trying to run through this as quickly as I can whilst listening.
Yes.
So if we're going to have the growth of zero emission private vehicles, we want to make sure that, as I think we do, that there's going to be adequate charging points and adequate backup and capacity to look after, service them in the broadest sense. Otherwise, people are not going to use them. Did you think that is dealt with in 4.2?
Yes, because it's covered.
Quotas for parking spaces are currently inadequate in Thatcham.
Yes.
So something's got to be done.
Yeah. And it becomes more important because not only are the cars parked on the street a nuisance, but they are also not capable of being charged. Or it's more difficult to charge them.
Yeah.
In the electronic sense, I think.
No, it's because there's no charging point convenient.
No, that's what I meant.
Okay.
But, charging has another meaning.
Section 4.3, where they were looking at, this is merging three options in the survey, which are all closely related, because once you have a driverless car, the concept of having a taxi, for example, with a driver seems to be redundant anymore.
Well, that's
Interesting.
Yes.
interesting, isn't it?
So-
never really.
Yes, so the point here was that they asked about these points independently, as choose two of them, but in fact they're all intimately related and you can't consider them separately. So that's why this text.
I must have had not considered the fact that a taxi, you would call it taxi, but you wouldn't have a driver.
Yeah. So if you have a pool,
Still have to pay.
the concept of a carpool and a taxi become pretty much the same, because if you want to obtain a car from a carpool, you don't go and go to where the carpool is. The car will come to you from the pool. And if it's a driverless car, then it would behave as a taxi as equally. Anyway, so that's the point there, and I think that is, I think, going beyond what we discussed before.
Yeah.
It does raise some important points that ought to be considered in the 30-year vision. And of course, the same is true for buses, because the cost of a bus, a large part of that is the cost of the driver. So it would be economic to have smaller buses more frequently, or perhaps even replace them with cars. But the following section 4.4 points out that that will not happen until at least late in this 30-year period. And therefore, the plan also needs to take account of public transport before that becomes feasible. So both of them need, that's what section 4.4 is saying. Section 4.5 addresses electric bikes and scooters, which was addressed, and one of the points there is that, of course, they are e-scooters are not legal at present, and therefore it'd be rather difficult and inappropriate for them to be formally taken into account. And finally, active travel. That's mainly pointing out that the West Berkshire Council does have a policy on that and the distance. And that was the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, which you may recall we considered a year or two ago. And that sets two distances, one of 2 kilometres for walking and 5 kilometres for cycling. So because the survey asks for both of them together, if you have a development that's between 2 and 5 kilometres away from the destination, we don't know from the survey whether people were talking about walking or cycling, and therefore whether they would be happy to use active travel. Thank you.
I mean, I hadn't really considered the part of driverless vehicles playing in the future, but it seems to me like, you know, you can whistle up your own vehicle, a bus, taxi, and it's driverless, and therefore will either cost you nothing or at least cost you a lot less. Isn't that going to actively dissuade people from all this active travel business? Because nobody's going to walk if they can get a free or practically free driverless car. So maybe this active travel should be downgraded, not upgraded.
Yeah, I can't imagine in my wildest dreams that driverless vehicles would be practically free. I think if anything else, there'll be a levy on it to pay for the vehicle that you're.
Yeah, so I think the point is that these are options that need to be considered. So we're highlighting a particular issue with active travel related to the way that they've done the survey. It's probably beyond the remit of the council to predict how people will choose to travel in 30 years' time, but we ought to make sure that whatever they choose to do is properly accommodated in the vision.
So should flag up the point that I've maybe it was a bit tongue-in-cheek, but I hadn't quite realised how far-reaching these driverless vehicles are going to be.
I suspect there'll be a charge on them, just to encourage people to walk, so that they take the load off the National Health Service, treating all these people.
The government will still need taxes to pay for all sorts of things.
If I may, just to comment on 4.5, the final paragraph. It will be wholly inappropriate to include students part of the prison while their use is unlawful. I mean, I agree their use is unlawful, but is it inappropriate to think about them because they're becoming so widespread that I think that within 5 years or so there will be a change in the law, and just because something's unlawful now doesn't seem to me to be a reason why you don't think about it. If you're looking ahead 30 years, if you think that the law might change. But I don't think they'll always be unlawful. I just think that they'll be regulated in some way.
Yeah, the problem is that it's difficult for a policy, for an official document, to draw conclusions that are contrary to the law.
No, I think all we're saying is that it should.
Can I suggest to replacing the word include with rely on? So it can consider them, but it can't rely on them as part of the.
Oh, yes. Yes, I see. Yes, okay.
Thank you. So we've reached the end of the document.
Yes,
If I go back to section 2, which we passed over because that is the conclusions of what we just discussed in more detail. Is there anything in that needs to be, that you would like to amend or think needs to be amended in the light of what we've proposed?
I still feel that in item 6, which is talking about space,
Yes.
but is anticipating electric vehicles. I think there should be, you might say, provision for space and charge points.
For
Well, that's okay.
okay, space and charge points, that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, they'll almost certainly be electric.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Thank you. So what I will do then is just go quickly through, just to highlight the points that we've agreed, where we've agreed to draft text offline. So I think we've got a specific proposal in specific word change in section 2. In section 3.2, we have to add a sentence about the flooding due to groundwater. We need section 3.3, we need to add the reference to the intention of both councils to reach net zero by 2030. In section 3.8, we need to make a reference to the Nature Discovery Centre and to the two main, the football club and the cricket club as extra areas, extra sports facilities. And then in section 4.5, we replace include with rely on. And in section 4.6, we add a mention that increase in accessibility and availability of motor vehicles might impact on the propensity of people to use active travel. So with those changes, which we'll draft the specific wording offline, are you content for this to be agreed as a submission from Thatcham Town Council to Iceni Projects?
Yeah.
Proposal for that.
Yes.
Thank you. And a seconder, thank you. And those in favour of that? Thank you. And I assume that Councillor Lister would be in favour of that if he were able to vote. Thank you. So,
may I say, a huge amount of work went into this, and I think on behalf of this committee, we should thank you for all the detailed work you've done, which is actually saved us from having to do a lot of it.
yeah, thank you for that. Although it was a little rushed, and if I had more time, it might have been a bit more refined. I thought it was important to make our submission within the time frame that was requested, so that it can be made of our technical views.
Well done.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Richard.
And we then move on when my laptop wakes up again. There's, I think, a bit more on Iceni Projects. If I just raise that, that they also, I can't remember if it was formally submitted in the last meeting or whether they just gave us a reference, but there are 2 documents that they have published on their website, which are the 2 baseline documents. Having looked through them, they are largely a compilation of publicly available material from bodies like the National Statistical Office, and therefore there's probably little need to comment on them apart from emissions. I think there are a few things that I think we probably ought to comment on. We've taken wrong assumptions, and what I would suggest is that I will do that before the next meeting. We'll put this on the agenda to consider those documents, but I think it will be only selective points. If you are content for that course of action, then we'll be able to follow up with that. And just one final point from me, that the document we've just agreed makes reference to the Thatcham vision. And I think that is a very important document that we would wish to see taken into great consideration in the baseline, because it is a background document, and therefore ask the deputy clerk to state that in the covering email to highlight that in the covering email to Iceni.
Would Iceni have ready access?
There's a link in the document, so they already can download it, just to emphasise that they ought to look at it in detail.
Well, the answer is yes.
Thank you very much. Are there any other matters that we need to consider at this meeting in relation to Iceni and its work? Councillor Lister, you've got anything?
No, nothing else, Chairman.
Thank you very much. So if we'll do that, we'll draft that in the next day or two, and then the Deputy Clerk will send that and we'll include it on the agenda, the baseline documents on the agenda for the next meeting. Thank you. So moving on to another aspect of the local plan update, the Henwick and Colthrop Village Consortium. I hand over to the Deputy Clerk to introduce this.
So members will maybe recall I circulated this a week or so ago just to advise you that Crowdace Homes are currently running a consultation for residents of Thatcham, and this is the document that they've sent out yet, and you have
Got us through the door.
Yeah, okay. So it was just to advise you that
Thank you.
that's been
What's the suggestion then, that we complete this as ordinary citizens, or?
They informed us, they informed the council that the survey was taking place.
Right.
Therefore, it's been drawn to the attention of the appropriate committee. My recommendation is that we note it. If you go to the online survey, it specifically asks for your name and address, which we can't supply as a council. And in any case, if you were to make any comments, this is in a survey for a report which Crowdace would then submit to West Berkshire Council. So if we were to wish to make a comment on any particular development, we would, I think, communicate directly with the council at the appropriate time and not through one of the developers. So my recommendation, therefore, is that we note the communication from Crowdace. We note that we've individually received the paper documents as well.
But if we wish to respond individually, you're saying we should.
Perfectly open to councillors to do that in a personal capacity.
Raising a point.
So then we move on to agenda item 7. Motor vehicles prohibited, experimental traffic regulation order on Lawrence's Lane.
we recently received a notification from West Berkshire Council. This is the text. I think I circulated this prior to the meeting. It's just showing basic plans with regards to introducing motor vehicle restrictions along Lawrence's Lane. They're doing this also in Thiel and in Newbury, but this is just specifically for Lawrence's Lane in Thatcham. So it's just really an advice that looked at. So we'll be sending out more detailed plans in due course. Just to highlight occurring. I think I also sent out the
So if members are not familiar, an experimental traffic regulation order is something which is for a limited duration, and it avoids some of the otherwise very lengthy consultation and legal process that will be needed. So thank you for that.
Are we going to debate and discuss this? Right, noted.
We weren't asked to comment on it, so unless a member has a specific comment that they wish to make.
Can I just ask?
I got it.
Yeah.
Talked about 3 locations.
yes.
Can
Yeah.
can you see the plan again? I presume.
I think
the
it's
3 locations are at either end. And
No, it's 3 locations in West Berkshire.
In different areas.
One in Thiel, one in Newbury, and this one.
So they're just part of the same legal document.
We've only got the plan for Lawrence's Lane. I mean, I've got to have my say on this, and that I'm utterly opposed to anything like this. And we've been talking in the previous headings about increased traffic and increased motor vehicles. For that, we need more roads, not fewer roads. We need roads to be kept open, not to be the road to the east that heads up from the Badley Moor Square, that was closed for a couple of days. I don't use it very much, but with that road being closed, then Lawrence's Lane couldn't come into its own and being used. If this we have these bollards at top and bottom, then nobody can get through. Previously it's come up as if it would be made one way, up or down, but this is blocking it off at top and bottom, except when there's an emergency. They're talking about locked bollards that have got to be in place, so nobody other than horses and bikes and so on will be able to have access. Back to my basic point, we should be keeping roads open, not closing them with all the extra traffic that's going to be forthcoming. There could be times when roads to the north either side are closed, and this could be a valuable resource. But no, it's going to be closed by the woke people who seem to be pursuing an anti-motor vehicle agenda. So I'm not happy with it at all.
If I may, we have discussed this several times, and Lawrence's Lane is really not a road in that sense that should be used as a road. It's a lane, and only one car can go up or down, and it would create more trouble if everybody decides to go that way.
Councillor Boyd.
It may even deter travellers from going up there and using land off Lawrence's Lane for their own purposes.
I was just contemplating what would happen if two driverless cars met in the middle of Lawrence's Lane. Anyway, yeah, thank
When
you
they
very much.
normally
Carl Ross,
in the past.
Deputy Town Clerk.
So they're going to put the restrictions in place temporarily, and it says here that once they've been in force for 6 months, there will be a public consultation on it.
So I think that is the normal process for experimental orders. Okay. So can I propose that we note this item? Thank you. Seconded. Those in favour of noting it. Councillor Cotton, you would like to note it?
Sorry, yes.
Thank you. Unanimous. We then move on to our what is normally the meat of the meeting. Hand over to the Deputy Town Clerk to introduce this week's selection of planning applications.
So first of all, we have 14 Acre Broadway. They are asking turn this way. You can't hear me, I'm looking that way. So they're looking to include an extraction system for the pizza takeaway shop, which I think we discussed previously at the previous meeting.
Formerly Barclays Bank.
I was just going to say where it used to be Barclays, right? Okay, I know it now.
There's this work in here, and they're looking at putting it in extraction. Yeah.
So if I recall correctly, we make no objection to the change of use.
Yeah.
So before we get into great detail about the discussion, it's 14, which is ask us, does this make a substantive difference to the decision that we made previous meeting?
I presume this extractor is to the rear of the building, as it won't be
It's
visible.
It's at the side, so
At the side.
behind that gate, which will be
Right.
to pedestrians, will be the prominent thing.
Sorry, can I see the diagram again? How high does the chimney reach? Mustn't go above ridge level, which it doesn't. Right.
Thank you.
I suggest no objection.
Do I have any further see any further information before we reach a conclusion? So I have a proposal with no objection. Does someone wish to second that? Councillor Boyd, thank you. Those in favour of making no objection, thank you. We look forward to the ready availability of
Is that both thin crust and thick crust?
I don't think that's a planning consideration, but nice to have
Right.
competition and provision.
We were planning on going down there and having a look.
Okay. Perhaps we should have a site visit before deciding.
Deep, yes, good, yeah.
Thank you. So, moving swiftly on to item 2, Thatcham Central again.
So here we have 31 Chapel Street. They're looking to change the use of the ground floor from offices to residential. They've got 2 bedrooms, they want to change it to a 2-bedroom flat, so it's internal alterations. Don't believe there's any alterations to the outside, so it's on the corner here. We currently have 5 parking spaces. This is the current configuration on the ground floor. I believe the first floor is going to remain as it is. And then this is the reconfiguration to the ground floor. So property above is accessed by the stairs here. They're proposing any the bin storage will go underneath the side there. Yeah, they've got no proposed increase on this 5 parking spaces. Looks like environmental health had no objections to this.
So the property already has a residential sort of look about it, apart from the external staircase. Councillor Crumley.
Can you just help me with the car parking spaces? I think you said there were 5 already, and then said there was not planned to change them. Well, if they're going from one, from office to residential, they don't need anything. How do the vehicles get in and out? Is it from the A4 or from the Waitrose car park? I presume it's from the A4, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's right. That seems a bit of a tricky way in and out, bearing in mind the volume of traffic on the A4, but I guess that's.
Yeah, they
Up
are.
there, just to the right there. Where do
They must come in.
I think they come in from, I think it's actually from the moors, in fact. I think there's a diagonal entrance on the side.
All right. I know I've been around there thousands of times. I haven't.
So is that a road entrance?
No, you can't walk.
Oh, no.
That's walking in.
The car park.
That's from the car park, so.
I was from the car park after all that, and I never noticed it. Right, okay, well, it's good to see there's enough car parking there. That's my point.
Any further matters that you would like to?
I don't think there's any substantial change from one to another, so I'm happy to pose no objection.
Seconder, thank you, Councillor Foster. Those in favour of no objection, that's unanimous again. So we then move to West Unit 1 Lower Henwick Farm. It's
So that's
probably not particularly visible from a,
nice here.
yeah. It is in fact visible from a public right of way because there's a footpath running along the north of it.
So they are looking.
I'm sorry, can we just identify exactly where it is?
That's the driving range to the right.
Oh, I see, right, the driving, near the driving range.
It's that collection of buildings.
I've got it now, yeah.
So I think their proposal is for an erection of temporary wooden structure to house 2 tall rooms. Looks like they're looking to erect them to the rear of the property here. Oh no, sorry, that's parking. So
Yeah.
one moment.
Okay.
There we go. Single extension to the rear here, and that's proposed extra parking there.
Any reason given as to why it's a temporary wooden structure? If a business is expanding and you want a talking therapy room, why is it a temporary? Is that just a planning we use to make it easier, or do you have any idea?
I don't think it's something which would be, unless it's in the design and access statement, but that's not something that they would need to declare in their application.
Yeah, there wasn't a huge extra information.
So I think we have to sort of take it on face value that if it's approved temporarily and it's stays there beyond the limit, then that's without planning application.
Can I say, Chairman, despite my initial confusion, I know the place well, and I've been there several times. And there's plenty of room on site, certainly for car parking,
Yeah.
as can be seen. So, and it's not near any residential property that I'm aware of, so can I suggest no objection?
Even though I use it as a footpath, it's fairly well hidden from the footpath, so it's not particularly visible. So proposal for no objection, second, no, those in favour of no objection, thank you. So thank you very much for that. And then we come to item 4, which is adjacent parish.
Yes. So this is Bowdown House, 41 Burrows Bank Road. They're proposing to subdivide the existing dwelling into 2 dwellings with associated parking, landscaping, private amenity arrangements. Failed to turn this one round. Sideways look on it.
Can you remind me of where, did you have a map of where it is?
So it's here,
Right.
at the end of Bowdown, there's a car park.
Mhm.
That's
Ah,
the-
right, it's that, okay, that very large property, yes.
Is it visible from the road? I don't
Not from the road.
recognise it.
It's not visible from anywhere, actually. but
It's
you
just
walk
about,
around it.
it's just about
Well,
visible.
it's visible from the air.
Yeah.
It's just about visible from the access road into the Bowdown Woods car
Yeah,
park.
you'll have to really look.
Yeah, but it's very,
Right.
very discreet. And I assume when it says existing dwelling, then in fact there are multiple dwellings in that house already, I guess.
Oh, it's an imposing, I mean,
Yeah,
it's a historic building. I think the King and Queen of Sweden or somewhere stayed there.
Norway, wasn't it? They were
Norway.
there during the last war.
Yeah.
So it's quite an extensive property, but they're looking to, I think, split it into 2.
all right, so it is one property.
Just
Okay.
says subdivision of existing dwelling
Right.
into 2 dwellings.
Right.
It's quite detailed.
One mansion into 2 slightly smaller
Yeah.
mansions.
Sorry, Chairman, you said a big imposing house. We can see that from
Yes.
there. Looks like something out of Jane Eyre or Rebecca or something. But you say it's already been
I
subdivided.
don't
How do you know
I thought
that?
it might have been, but apparently it hasn't, because it's not clear whether, are there already multiple dwellings within it, or is it already?
I don't think.
Okay, well, whether or not, it's a very large building, so I can understand why.
And sorry to go again, it's a subdivision. It's not seeking to build. I mean, it says associated parking, to landscape, etc. But they're not built. There's no new build stuff on the side too.
No.
Right.
So that's the existing.
I'd rather like a site visit. I mean, intriguing to go and have a look around. But still,
Yeah, it would be interesting to see the place.
I think you have to muster another 9 objectors before you do that, right?
But I can't see,
and attend a site meeting. Yeah.
I can't see that we'd have any objection.
I'm just looking back to see if they've got any extras on
No
there.
You're proposing no objection. I'll second you this time.
Any further comments? Those in favour of no objection? You make no objection then. Express a desire. Thank you. So we then move on to, there are 3 applications that we wouldn't ordinarily consider.
There's been no representations made since.
So we will then note those. Or do what no, we don't note them, we just don't consider them. So planning matters, agenda item 9.
Nothing from me, Chairman.
Thank you. Any other planning matters? No, thank you. So agenda item 10, traffic management, highways and road safety matters.
Just one from me, Chairman. We've been notified that Colthrop Lane, Thatcham will be closed during the hours of 8 and 4 on Sunday, the 8th of May. The closure will effectively begin on the south side of the level crossing and run westward for some 250 metres. There is no alternative route, thus access will be permitted throughout. Note a short delay may be warranted as plant may well need to be moved.
That's the section of Colthrop Lane, that's the other side of the Colthrop level crossing when you turn right. It just serves some industrial premises. There are no residential premises down there. Yeah. I think if they've preserved blue light access.
Is that, you say you turn left over the level crossing on Turk, because that the public road goes left?
The bit that they're talking about
Okay.
is on the right.
Okay, so fine.
Yeah.
Thank you. So,
I think the public road goes both ways.
yeah, okay. But the through road turns left.
Well, either goes through.
Well, it goes to houses, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, it goes to Colthrop cottages, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, so that one, decision notices.
Sorry.
Councillor Boyd.
Yes, can I go back to item 10?
Yes.
About a week and a half ago, I was wandering around the streets wearing my chain of office, as you do. And I was stopped by a man, Derek Riley, in a wheelchair, a motorised wheelchair. And he was asking me if it's against the law for cars to park on the pavement, because he quite often comes across people parking on the pavement, restricting his access to carry on the path, requiring him, and I would suspect mothers with pushchairs, to then go out in the road to get around these vehicles. I had a quick look, and it is against the law to park on the pavement.
That's complicated. It's not against the law to park on the pavement, but it is against the law to cause an obstruction by doing so. So the point is, if you can't get past, then it is an offence.
Right.
That's just parking partially on a wide pavement is not of itself an offence.
So what can we do about it?
So where was this? Which?
Well, he didn't say it was a specific place. He was just saying it's something that, as a wheelchair user, he encounters often in and around Thatcham. And can we get it stopped? And I said, well, it would probably, it's going to be down to the highways and whether or not the police have the appetite to be coming out and issuing tickets.
I mean, we have a road next to where you live, Mr. Crumley. There's always vans and things parked. Is it Violet Grove?
Yes, every time I drive by, there appear to be more of them, but that's really not a through road. I mean,
no, but it's still blocking the pavement.
yes, but if they, I mean, if vehicles are always parked on the road and not partly on the pavement, they may well cause a greater obstruction to traffic trying to negotiate the carriageway, because there'll be somebody on the other side and vehicles won't be able to get through. I often, even in my own street, if I'm parking up, I park half on the pavement and half on the road. I like to think there's enough passageway for mother and prams to get by. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but there's so many vehicles about and the roads aren't as wide as they might be, that this problem is probably much worse in other areas, larger cities and more heavily built up areas.
Back to planning.
I don't think there's a snap answer.
There are some roads in Newbury where you're required to park partly on the pavement in order to be within the lines that West Berkshire Council painted. So there's a white line down the side which you're required to be behind, but that doesn't mean half of the vehicle. So I'm thinking of the road that's parallel to Craven Road.
Yeah, I have seen it.
On the north of Craven Road, but
Gloucester
there's
Road.
still room.
Yes.
Yes, probably. But there is still room for somebody in a motorised wheelchair to pass inside.
A double buggy, which are the.
So
I'll get back to him, and
If you could and find out the specific locations, and then we can investigate.
well, if I give him the information that if they are parked on the pavement, but he can still get past, then it's not illegal. But if he
Probably ought to confirm that before we. I'll confirm that offline with you. And then, but the point is that if they're causing an obstruction, then we also need to inform him who is the enforcement authority.
Right. Okay, thank you very much.
I'm not sure if it's the police or civil parking enforcement, it may be.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So Sorry for moving on prematurely, so we can reach agenda item 11, decision notices.
Okay, just a few this week. And quite a few of them weren't considered because they didn't fall within our remit to consider, and they've been approved. And the others are all no objections and were approved.
Okay. Thank you very much. So we then move on to reports from town council appointees to outside bodies on flood bodies. And as none of the appointees are present this evening, I'll turn to the deputy clerk to ask if you've received any information for this meeting from them.
I've not received anything.
Obviously, we meet far more frequently than those bodies do, so that's not surprising. So in that case, I think we will just conclude that that was the last agenda item of the meeting. The meeting is therefore closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Well,
And the last meeting of this civic year.
oh my golly, oh dear. We're going to have withdrawal.
Any time is it?
Yeah.
Okay.